Letters have always been my enemies. They dance across pages like mocking little soldiers, rearranging themselves when I least expect it. My teachers called it dyslexia, but I've always felt it was something more, as if the letters themselves had minds of their own, playing cruel tricks on me. If I had known then just how right I was, maybe I could have prevented what happened next. The incident occurred last December, just as the first snow began to fall. Mom had bought special Christmas stationery for my 7-year-old sister Emma to write her annual letter to Santa. The paper was thick and cream-colored, with delicate silver snowflakes embossed in the corners that seemed to shimmer in the right light. The matching envelopes had a peculiar iridescence to them, like fresh snow under a full moon. "Help Emma write her letter," Mom said, laying the stationery on our kitchen table. "It'll be good practice for you, Jason." She gave me that encouraging smile she always wore when trying to help me overcome my reading challenges. If only she knew she was sending us both down a path that would lead straight to hell. Emma bounced in her chair, pigtails swinging with excitement. "Can we use the special pen?" She reached for the fancy calligraphy pen Dad had bought last Christmas, the one with the deep red ink that flowed like liquid rubies. I remember everything about that moment with perfect clarity. The way the kitchen lights cast strange shadows on the paper, how the red ink seemed to gleam wetly no matter how long it dried, and the slight resistance of the pen as it moved across the paper, as if it were cutting into flesh rather than writing on paper. "Dear Santa," Emma dictated, while I carefully formed each letter. The words came slowly, painfully, each one a battle between my mind and my hand. "Dear Santa, I have been very good this year. I helped Mom with the dishes, and I didn't fight with Jason too much. For Christmas, I would like a new bike, pink please, and maybe a puppy if you think I've been good enough. I promise to take care of it. Love, Emma." Simple enough, innocent enough, but when I addressed the envelope, something went wrong. The letters started their familiar dance, jumping and twisting before my eyes. SANTA became something else entirely. Looking back, I swear the ink grew darker as I wrote, turning from bright red to the color of dried blood. I didn't notice my mistake until we reached the post office. The fluorescent lights there always made my dyslexia worse, the harsh glare causing letters to swim and shift even more than usual. As I handed the envelope to the postal worker, something made me look twice at the address. There, in that deep red ink, I had written SATAN, North Pole, Arctic Circle. The postal worker didn't seem to notice anything strange. She just smiled, stamped the envelope, and dropped it into the sorting bin. But as we turned to leave, I noticed something odd. The shadows in the corners of the post office seemed deeper than they should have been, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I heard distant laughter. That night, I had my first nightmare. In it, I was back at the post office, but all the lights were that same deep red as the ink we'd used. The postal worker's smile stretched too wide, revealing row after row of needle-sharp teeth, and when she dropped our letter into the sorting bin, I could hear screaming coming from inside. I woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m., drenched in sweat, to find that all the shadows in my room had shifted to point toward Emma's bedroom down the hall. Something about the darkness felt wrong, as if it were paying attention to us. 3 days later, the black envelope arrived. The black envelope arrived on a Thursday morning. It sat in our mailbox like a void, absorbing the winter sunlight around it. No postmark, no return address, just my name written in that same red ink that seemed to gleam wetly, like fresh blood on obsidian. Jason Michael Thorne. Not just my first and last name, my middle name too, which hadn't been on the letter to Santa. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The envelope was cold to the touch, much colder than it should have been in the winter sun. It felt expensive, like the kind of paper you'd use for a wedding invitation to a funeral. A crow landed on our mailbox as I held the envelope, its eyes reflecting red in the morning light. It cocked its head at me, and I swear it nodded before taking flight. As it passed overhead, something fell from its beak, a small white feather that turned black before it hit the ground. Inside the house, Emma was watching cartoons, the cheerful sound creating a surreal backdrop as I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope. The paper opened with a sound like a whispered scream. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, yellowed with age and crisp as autumn leaves. Strange symbols were watermarked into the paper, symbols that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. At the top, in that same wet-looking red ink, were the words "I'll never forget," rules for correspondence with the Dark Lord. Rule 1. The moon is now a postal service window. Never look directly at it between midnight and 3:33 a.m. Night deliveries are for other recipients. Rule 2. Each night before sleep, leave an offering at your bedroom threshold. Start with memories, progress to dreams, end with hopes. The order matters. Rule 3. Your reflections are no longer your own. They're checking your mail. If they wave first, wave back. If they smile first, run. Rule 4. Your sister's transformation has already begun. Her letters to Santa have always reached me. This year, she gets a response. Rule 5. On December 24th, a choice must be made. One soul freely given, one soul freely taken. Both must belong to you. As I read each rule, the ink seemed to crawl across the page like veins filling with blood. At the bottom, a final note appeared in handwriting that looked disturbingly like Emma's. Mistakes in addressing have consequences, but some mistakes are simply destiny with better postage. That night, I discovered what Rule 1 meant. The moon hung impossibly large in my bedroom window, and through its silver light, I saw shadows moving with purpose, delivering packages that screamed when they were opened, carrying letters written in languages that burned the eye, pushing carts full of parcels wrapped in night itself. I tried to ignore Rule 2, but when I woke the next morning, I found my favorite childhood memory, my 10th birthday party, had been taken anyway. I could still remember that I'd had a birthday, but the joy and details of the day were gone, leaving only a hollow space in my mind. The bathroom mirror showed me what Rule 3 meant. My reflection moved a fraction of a second too slowly, and its eyes held an awareness that wasn't mine. When I reached up to touch my face, it reached back a moment too late, and its fingertips left frost on the glass. But it was Rule 4 that truly terrified me. Emma's drawings had changed overnight. Her crayons now sketched impossible geometries, and her stick figures had too many limbs. At breakfast, she hummed songs that made the milk curdle in her cereal bowl. The other Santa is much nicer, she told me that morning, her voice harmonizing with itself. He says my real presents can't be wrapped in paper. They have to be wrapped in choices. Rule 5 hung over everything like a sword. December 24th approached, and with each passing day, I felt the weight of the choice growing heavier. One soul freely given, one soul freely taken, both must belong to you. The crow returned each morning, now wearing what looked like a tiny postal worker's cap. It watched me with eyes that knew too much, and sometimes, when no one else was around, it spoke in my father's voice. Special delivery coming soon. The Dark Lord's postal service never loses an address, even when the address loses itself. The first rule's effects grew stronger as December progressed. The moon swelled larger each night, its surface crawling with dark shapes that sorted eternal mail. I learned to keep my blinds closed during delivery hours, but I could still hear them, the shuffle of feet on celestial paths, the rustle of packages wrapped in starlight, the soft thud of parcels that whimpered when they landed. One night, I made the mistake of peeking. Through my window, I saw postal workers with too many limbs carrying sacks that leaked shadows. They moved across the moon's surface like insects, their motions jerky and wrong. One turned its head completely backward and saw me watching. Its smile stretched up to where ears should have been. I didn't sleep that night or the next. The second rule became increasingly demanding. Simple memories weren't enough anymore. The offerings grew more specific. Monday, the memory of my first bike ride. Tuesday, the taste of Mom's chocolate chip cookies. Wednesday, the sound of Dad's laughter. Thursday, the feeling of summer rain. Each morning, these memories were gone, leaving hollow spaces in my mind like missing teeth. But it was the third rule that truly began to break me. My reflections developed personalities of their own. The bathroom mirror showed me aging backwards, while the hallway mirror aged me forward. The reflection in my phone screen would mouth warnings I couldn't quite read. Windows caught glimpses of things that weren't me at all. Mom's vanity mirror became the worst. My reflection there had started collecting things, memories I'd given as offerings, dreams it had stolen while I slept, hopes it was saving for some terrible purpose. It arranged them on shelves I couldn't see, cataloging pieces of my life like a librarian of loss. Emma's transformation under Rule 4 accelerated daily. Her shadow stopped matching her movements. Her voice gained harmonics that made houseplants wither. Her toys came alive at night, conducting tiny ceremonies with her crayons. The other Santa teaches me such wonderful things, she told me over breakfast, as her cereal rearranged itself into symbols that hurt to look at. Did you know that time tastes different on the other side of the mirror, like candy made of forever? Mom and Dad remained oblivious to all of it. They explained away Emma's floating toys as tricks of the light. They didn't notice when her drawings crawled off the refrigerator at night. They smiled pleasantly when she spoke in languages that made the air bleed. "She's so creative," Mom would say, as Emma's paper dolls performed human sacrifices. "That's my girl," Dad would beam, while Emma taught the shadows how to dance. The crow watched it all from its perch on our mailbox, growing larger and more postal worker-like each day. Its feathers had started forming the shape of a uniform, and its beak now held a tiny mail bag. "Processing," it would announce each morning. "Processing." But it was the fifth rule that haunted every moment. December 24th approached like a wave of darkness, and I could feel time bending around that date. Some days seemed to last forever, while others vanished in a blink. The choice loomed closer, one soul freely given, one soul freely taken. I tried to research what it meant, but the library books bled when I touched them. The internet showed me only pages of shifting symbols. Even my phone would only display the text, processing. In that same red ink, Emma knew something about it. I caught her making lists in her diary, writing in script that moved like worms, things to pack for the other side, names I'll have after, colors that don't exist yet. The crow grew more talkative as December progressed. It started delivering small packages, tiny black boxes tied with ribbons made of moonlight. Each contained a preview of possible futures, all of them terrible, all of them true. Special delivery, it would croak. Priority processing for the Thorn family. Express shipping to damnation or salvation. Postage due in souls. The moon grew impossibly large now, filling most of the night sky. Rule 1's postal service had become a constant spectacle of horror. Dark silhouettes sorted endless mail across the lunar surface, their movements increasingly frantic as December 24th approached. The night deliveries became bolder. Packages would appear inside our house, wrapped in paper made from frozen screams. One night, a parcel accidentally dropped into our yard. By morning, all the grass within 10 feet had aged 100 years, turning to dust at the slightest breeze. The box itself was addressed to the previous occupant of reality. Rule 2's offerings grew more precious. Simple memories weren't enough anymore. The threshold demanded more. The memory of how colors looked before they started changing. The feeling of safety in my own home. The certainty that reality was solid and unchangeable. The belief that my sister was still entirely human. Each morning, another piece of my identity vanished, replaced by hollow spaces that ached like phantom limbs. Rule 3's reflections staged a revolution. My mirror self began collecting other reflections, building an army of backwards versions of me. They would hold meetings when they thought I wasn't watching, planning something that involved complicated diagrams drawn in reversed writing. The bathroom mirror became a window into their world. I caught glimpses of a vast postal sorting facility where everything worked in reverse, staffed by reflections of everyone who had ever looked into a mirror. They processed packages containing stolen memories and forbidden hopes, preparing them for some final delivery. Emma's transformation under Rule 4 reached terrifying new levels. Her eyes had started changing color, based on which reality she was currently perceiving. Her voice could tune itself to frequencies that shattered glass and rearranged furniture. Her drawings didn't just move anymore, they escaped into the real world. "The other Santa says I'm almost ready," she told me, as her shadow puppets performed scenes from futures that hadn't happened yet. "He says my old name won't fit soon. I'll need one with more angles in it." I found her diary, now written in a script that moved like living things across the page. "Dear Other Santa, the changes you promised are beautiful. Jason doesn't understand yet, but he will. His choice is coming, and choices are just doors that open both ways. You taught me that. The Moon Postmaster says my new form will arrive soon. I've been practicing my new geometries. Mom and Dad can't see them yet, but the mirrors can. The reflections help me rehearse. Will I still be able to remember them after? The crow says memories work differently on your side of Christmas. With anticipation, Emma, Final version pending. The fifth rule's choice loomed closer, warping time around its approach. December seemed to stutter, days repeating or skipping entirely. The calendar on the kitchen wall showed impossible dates, and clocks in our house started running backwards to count down to December 24th. The crow had grown to the size of a man now, its postal uniform complete with a name tag that read, Messenger of Final Notices. It no longer bothered hiding its supernatural nature, openly sorting mail on our front lawn and delivering packages that defied physics. Processing proceeds according to schedule, it announced each morning in a voice that echoed from every shadow. The Dark Lord's Postal Service maintains its 100% delivery rate. All choices reach their destinations. All transformations complete their forms. Our parents' denial reached new heights. They stepped around the crow without seeing it, ignored the impossible angles appearing in Emma's bedroom doorway, and smiled pleasantly through breakfast while their daughter spoke prophecies in tongues. "She's really getting into the Christmas spirit," Mom said, as Emma's cereal spelled out warnings in alphabets that predated human language. "That's my girl," Dad repeated, while Emma taught the houseplants how to sing hymns to entropy. The house itself began to change, adapting to accommodate Emma's evolving form. Her bedroom door sometimes opened onto different rooms, different times, different realities. The walls in her room had started growing extra corners to house geometries that shouldn't exist. And still, December 24th approached, bending time and space around its inevitability. One soul freely given, one soul freely taken. Both must belong to you. The crow brought me a final notice, written in ink that moved like living shadows. Attention, Thorn, Jason. Postal code. Violation 666. Final processing, scheduled December 24th. Your choice awaits delivery. No forwarding address possible. December 24th arrived like a door slamming shut on reality. The moon hung frozen overhead, its surface now completely covered with postal workers processing the final deliveries of the season. Their movements had become frenzied, desperate, as if racing against something even they feared. Rule 1's night delivery service reached its peak. Packages rained from the lunar surface, each one containing fragments of other children's futures, missed opportunities, and roads not taken. They piled up on our lawn like fallen stars, each one ticking with the sound of countdown clocks. The second rule's offering threshold had become a hungry mouth in reality. It no longer accepted memories or dreams. It wanted pieces of the present now. Each hour, I had to sacrifice another moment of now, watching as chunks of my present existence were processed and sorted for delivery to unknown recipients. My reflection army from Rule 3 staged their final coup. Every mirror, window, and reflective surface became a portal into their postal dimension. They sorted and processed all the pieces of me I'd sacrificed, preparing them for final delivery. My mirror self wore a postmaster's uniform now, directing traffic in a world where everything worked backwards and time flowed in reverse. Emma's transformation under Rule 4 neared completion. Her human form had become optional, something she wore out of habit rather than necessity. Her voice existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and her shadow had developed its own postal route. "It's almost time," she said that morning, her words leaving frost patterns in the air. The other Santa says your choice will determine my final form. Will you choose freely, brother, or will you make him take what he needs? The fifth rule's choice, press down like a physical weight. One soul freely given, one soul freely taken. Both must belong to you. I finally understood the horrible truth. How can both souls belong to you unless you're the same soul existing in two states? My reflection had never been collecting random memories and dreams. It had been collecting the pieces needed to become real. The Crow postman made its final delivery, a black envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. Dear Other Santa, my brother understands now. The choice was always his reflection. The soul freely given will be his original. The soul freely taken will be his mirror self. Then I can finally become what you promised. Thank you for helping him deliver himself to the right destination. With eternal gratitude, Emma, final form approved. As midnight approached, reality began to fold along postal routes never meant for human understanding. Our house became a sorting facility for lost souls and misdirected dreams. The walls breathed postal regulations, and the air tasted like stamped promises. Mom and Dad sat frozen in the living room, their denial finally complete, turned to statues by their inability to process the impossible. They would stay that way until the choice was made, until reality knew which version to keep. Emma floated at the intersection of all possible dimensions, her true form too beautiful and terrible to comprehend. The Crow postman perched on her shoulder, now wearing a supervisor's badge. Final delivery in progress, it announced. Choose your destination, Jason Thorne. Which version gets delivered to tomorrow? Which version gets returned to sender? My reflection stood before me, more real than ever, ready to step through the mirror and take my place. All the memories and dreams it had collected had made it more real than I was, more solid in a world that had stopped making sense. The choice was clear, even if it was impossible. One soul freely given, my original self, worn thin by sacrificed memories and offered dreams. One soul freely taken, my reflection self, built from collected moments and stored hopes, ready to become real. Emma smiled with too many mouths as I stepped toward the mirror. The other Santa will be so pleased. Your delivery will be his best Christmas present. The moon postal workers paused their sorting to watch. The packages stopped their ticking. All of reality held its breath, waiting to see which version of me would be marked Return to Sender. I stood before the mirror at exactly midnight on December 24th, watching as my reflection reached out with a hand that had become more substantial than my own. We touched fingertips through the glass, and I felt reality shiver around us. Processing final delivery, the Crow postman announced, its voice echoing through every reflection in the world. Postage paid in full, no return address available. Emma floated above us, her form shifting between states of existence. In one moment, she was my 7-year-old sister. In the next, she was something ancient and beautiful, made of angles that shouldn't exist and possibilities that hadn't been invented yet. The other Santa is waiting, she said, in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. Your choice opens the door for my transformation. The Dark Lord's postal service requires proper processing. Rule 1 shattered as the moon crashed through our ceiling without breaking it, turning our house into a cosmic post office. Dark shapes sorted reality itself into neat piles marked was, is, and never was. Rule Two's threshold had grown into a monstrous thing, consuming every offering I'd ever made, using them to build a bridge between what I was and what my reflection had become. Rule 3 reached its culmination as every mirror in the world connected to this moment. I could see myself reflected infinitely, each version slightly more real than the last, all of them ready to deliver themselves to their final destination. Rule 4 wrapped around Emma like a chrysalis of possibility. She had become the sorting algorithm for existence itself, processing all possible versions of reality through the filter of her transformation. And Rule 5 was a door that only opened one way. Choose freely, the Crow postman instructed, now wearing a manager's uniform made of consolidated darkness. The Dark Lord's postal service has a perfect delivery record to maintain. I looked at my reflection one last time. It had all my sacrificed memories, all my offered dreams, all the hopes I'd given up. It was more me than I was now, more real, more solid, more certain. I stepped forward as it stepped back, our movements synchronized one final time. The glass felt like water, then like air, then like nothing at all. We passed through each other, exchanging places, exchanging realities, exchanging existence itself. The world inverted. I was the reflection now, looking out from behind every mirror. My former self stood in what had been my reality, more substantial and real than ever before. All the memories and dreams I'd collected over the month now belonged to it, making it the truest version of Jason Thorne. Emma's transformation completed in a cascade of beautiful impossibilities. Her human form dissolved into pure potential, reshaping itself into something that could exist in all realities simultaneously. The other Santa's promised gift was finally delivered. Processing complete, the Crow postman declared. One soul freely given, the original, one soul freely taken, the reflection, both belonging to the same existence, now properly sorted and delivered. Mom and Dad unfroze, their minds automatically adjusting to accept the new reality. They would remember this version of me as always having been here. The other version, now trapped in the postal dimension of mirrors, would become a fading memory, a strange shadow, glimpsed in reflective surfaces. Emma, or what Emma had become, smiled with infinite understanding. "The other Santa keeps his promises," she said. "You've all been delivered to exactly where you were always meant to be." From my new existence in the mirror world, I watched as my other self lived the life I'd given up. I became part of the Dark Lord's postal service, helping to sort and deliver other lost souls, other mistaken addresses, other choices freely made and freely taken. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I see new letters arriving, addressed to Satan instead of Santa. I watch as the dark postal workers deliver their rules, their choices, their transformations. I help process their deliveries, guide their reflections, prepare them for their own inversions. And sometimes, when the moon hangs full and heavy in the sky, I see Emma soaring between realities, delivering impossible packages to impossible addresses. She waves to me through every reflection, her form beautiful and terrible, exactly what she was always meant to become. The Dark Lord's postal service maintains its perfect record. Every letter finds its true destination. Every soul delivers itself to where it belongs. Every choice arrives exactly when and where it was meant to. After all, the devil isn't just in the details. Sometimes he's in the mail.